Welcome to Roots Stem Painting, and in this video we're going to show you how to paint the Patriarch from the Space Hulk Special Edition boxed game for use with my Genestealer cult. The figure's second hand, which is why it's already been painted. I've not stripped it because the paint's quite thin and it's quite dark anyway, so I'm going to be putting a dark undercoat over the top. The base is a laser cut piece of MDF to a similar size to heavy weapon teams that you get from Imperial Guard, and on the base I've covered it with a mixture of different sand, grits and bits of coal that you can find from various different modelling stores. After basing the unit with Mechanicus Grey spray paint, I'm now going to dry brush Administratum Grey over the top of the figure to pick out the detail. Then I airbrush Druchii Violet all over the figure using an airbrush. This will basically change the base colour, as the ink will be part of the unit rather than it being into the recesses. It will still give a recessed shade, but will cover the figure overall, changing the whole appearance to a more purple look. I then dry brush Russ Grey in downward sweeps across the figure, picking out the details, meaning like the shoulders and the back and the head, to create a new highlight and contrast. Using a smaller dry brush, I now dry brush Administratum Grey again on the edges, just to pick out as a highlight. Using a wet palette, I will now be going between Bestial Brown and Mephiston Red for the claws, basically base coating the entire claws with the Bestial Brown and then applying more and more layers of Mephiston Red until I get a red edge, just making sure that more and more of the recess is visible. When painting the claws, I also use this for the Blood Angel helmets that are on the base and in his hands. Then you started using a wet palette of Dark Reaper and Caledor Sky for the recesses in the Carapace, painting the Dark Reaper in first and then just stroking the brush across with the Caledor Sky to pick the raised edges, creating a bit of a highlight. On the other side of the Terminator helmets, I went for a Dark Angel's look, using Caliban Green to Warpstone Glow on the wet palette. This is mainly because Space Hulk's originally Blood Angels, and of course I've got an opponent that plays Dark Angels, and it's always good to taunt your friends. I then added lead belcher to the base of a model and also to the metallic parts of the Space Marine helmets in his hand and on the base. Using an old brush, I am now going to cover the metallic parts on the base with Typhus Corrosion. It's quite a gritty ink which will help with the next phase. Then, using the same brush, I'm going to dry brush Martian Ironearth, which is a base in texture paint, onto the metallic base. This should give it quite a rusted and corroded look. While waiting for that to dry properly, I add Nuln Oil into the metal parts on the Space Marine helmets. Next I apply Necron Compound all over the rusted and corroded metal plates and put little bits of it onto the Space Marine helmets to give them a slightly battered feel. I then use Ushabti Bone and Tallarn Sand on my wet palette, getting a good cross-reference and mix, just to build up the skulls around the metal parts on the base. Next I apply Stirland Mud onto the flat areas of the base to give it a more built up feel towards the plinth. While the mud is drying, I use Seraphine Sepia all over the skulls I painted earlier. I now use an airbrush to apply Bestial Brown onto the remains of the base, edging up towards the plinth. If I do catch the plinth, not too much of an issue, as this will give it a feathered mud look. I'm then going to paint Skrag Brown directly from the pot using an old brush in a slight bit of overbrushing technique. This is so that I am catching all the raised areas of the mud and the basing. Then dry brush Tyrant Skull over the remains of the base once this is dry to pick out the final parts of the detail. I then paint a tiny bit of Nihilakh Oxide into the eyes. These give it an alien look. Then using PVA glue, apply small patches of static grass onto the base. Finally, after painting Ushabti Bone onto the teeth, I use Agrax Earthshade in upstrokes to make sure that the ink will settle towards the top of the teeth themselves. And that's it. I've included all the paints that I've used in my description, and I'm also going to be including a link to a site where I learnt how to effectively create my own cheap version of a wet palette. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope these tips come in handy for a lot of you guys. Happy painting, happy gaming, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification button. I'll see you next time.